They never gave us the opportunity to deliberate on anything but the charges for Hinkelson. That was it. As a matter of fact, when they announced that those were the only charges, it was an uproar in that room. There was several more charges that could have gone forward on all of those officers, or at least the 3 shooters.
2 of the grand jurors who heard the case against Louisville, Kentucky cops who entered the home of Breonna Taylor with a no-knock warrant and then murdered her, shooting multiple rounds into the apartment. They've come out and they've said that the district attorney, or I should say the attorney general in the state of Kentucky, has not been forthcoming, has not been honest about the actual charges that were presented to the grand jury during this case. They didn't even get the opportunity to deliberate on possible homicide charges. Now, these 2 jurors felt the need to come forward after seeing how the prosecutor spoke about the grand jury's decision and felt that he was being misleading and misrepresented what really happened. So the jurors received permission to come out and speak. They don't want their identity to be released because of safety concerns, but they have spoken to CBS's This Morning, and I think their side of the story is really, really important. Remember, not a single one of those cops was charged with homicide. No one was charged criminally for what happened to Breonna Taylor specifically. There was only one cop, Officer Hinkelson, who ended up facing charges for wanton endangerment because he ran into the parking lot and just started shooting indiscriminately. And some of those gunshots went into an apartment where there was a pregnant woman. Luckily, she wasn't hurt, but seems like nothing's gonna happen in regard to criminal charges with Breonna Taylor. And the grand jurors want to explain to the public why that is. Let's watch the first video.
They didn't give us the charges up front when they gave us all of that testimony over 20-something hours, and then to say that these are the only charges that they're coming up with. It's like, well, what did we just sit through? And then to be told that we're not charging them with anything else, to me, it was a betrayal.
Why is this so extraordinary, Kevin?
Normally, the grand jurors are presented with the law and the charges so that they can listen to the facts with an open mind and apply those facts to the law, almost as a roadmap.
What happened here?
What happened here was it was done in the complete reverse.
What stands out to you the most?
From a legal perspective, it looked like they weren't following the grand jurors, and they only wanted the grand jurors to follow them, which is contrary to the actual rule.
So while I've never been on a grand jury, I have served as a juror before, and the thing that really did stand out to me was that, yeah, the charges, they explain what the charges are in the very beginning of the trial, and then they explain to you what needs to be proven and what the burden of proof is in order to find someone guilty. And the whole reason why they do that up front is so when you're listening to the evidence, right? Then you know what to listen for. You need to find the actual evidence that proves the charges that are being brought forth. And then when you're deliberating, you can cite the evidence that you heard that either proves that the person did the crime or disproves it. That's how it's supposed to work. They didn't even tell the jurors, according to these 2 grand jurors, what the charges were until after they heard all the evidence.
So the grand jury has to come up with the decision of whether or not to proceed with these charges, right?
Right.
Again, everyone is expecting on this day to get a yes or no. In fact, I think many people didn't expect to get anything on these charges. So the anger was there, but there wasn't much surprise there. I got to be honest. Now, if you weren't even presented with the opportunity to deliberate over the charges or over what the charges could be, how could you charge someone? This isn't a verdict type of thing that they were looking through. This isn't them deliberating on whether or not they're gonna send these guys to prison for 20 years. That wasn't it. That was in order to go forward with the trial that encompasses these charges. Not done. Not done. So we don't get the opportunity to get to dive deep enough into the details given to a jury to decide whether or not these guys are guilty or not. To decide whether or not the whole everything that happened, all the actions that happened on that night were justified. Honestly, to get to the real scene of the story, because we got 2 opposing accounts that were told to everybody. So we didn't even get that far. And this is what we're arguing about, whether or not we should get charges, bro. charges. And this is what we didn't get a chance to get.
Exactly. And so, and thank you for differentiating between a grand jury and a regular jury. A regular jury needs to either find the person guilty or not guilty. In this case, yes, you're correct. They're trying to figure out whether or not there's enough evidence to continue on with the charges that have been presented by the prosecutor. And the thing is, as you mentioned, the prosecutor didn't even give them a chance to consider homicide charges. And that is explained by the grand jurors in the next video. Let's take a look at that.
Our investigation showed, and the grand jury agreed, that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire.
When he stated that there were 6 possible murder charges and that the grand jury had agreed that those didn't apply, the first time I heard the word 6 possible murder charges was in that news conference.
It wasn't presented to you in the grand jury deliberations?
No. And personally, when I do something, I take responsibility for it. We had not done that.
I really felt that this was all Cameron. This was up to him. We didn't get a choice in that at all. So I was livid. By the time I heard what he was saying, everything that came out of his mouth, I was saying liar, because we didn't agree to anything. We never met Cameron.
Yes, and that's Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who allegedly lied to the public about what the potential charges were, lied about what the juries or the grand jurors agreed on. Jayar, take it away.
Okay, so as again, it's almost we have to remind everybody what's been happening since that day when they said that the grand jury decided not to pursue charges. Since then, one particular juror that's been anonymous has been trying to come forward to tell his side of the story, to tell what he said happened and what he experienced, and then what the result was told to the public. There's been stonewalling, there's been pushback, there's been excuses as to why we can't let this guy talk. There's been, we're looking to protect him. All these things have been said since then, so that this juror won't speak about what actually happened. Nobody finds that fishy. Nobody finds that as a reason to investigate why the people that are in charge of whether or not this grand jury saw the evidence that they claimed that the grand jury saw, whether or not the grand jury can come forward and say so or not. Why is that the problem suddenly? There's such a lack of credibility from everybody on this side of this story. If you put yourself in that position of that's your family member, you'd be pulling your hair out. You'd be in front of that courthouse every day. You'd be knocking on Cameron's door, calling him, sending him emails, trying to get something going, because that's your loved one's life that was lost. And we didn't get a chance to even deliberate on the actual evidence. Now, Donald Trump likes to say he's done more for black people than anyone else since Abraham Lincoln. And that's based off of his criminal justice reform. So I just want to point out, what part of criminal justice reform is going into fixing things like this, where you have a state's prosecutor and a Cameron in here stonewalling, hiding evidence, lying about what they were given, what was given to the grand jury. He just talks about releasing people that were wrongfully convicted, or maybe convicted and given super long sentences, and that's all there is to it. What else is there before these people get in prison? What about when they've spent 15 years in prison that they shouldn't have spent there? What about the dereliction of duty from our justice system in not allowing these things to happen? Or actually, then actionably going after people when they shouldn't, and knowingly presenting wrong evidence. This happens countless times, over and over and over again. How many times have we heard stories about people in this country who end up in jail on rape charges, and we found out that the prosecutor was hiding information that absolutely and utterly exonerated them, and they said, well, I'm gonna go forward with this because all I need is a conviction. How many times have we seen that? What part of the criminal justice system and criminal justice reform is changing that part? Because right now, we have Breonna Taylor, who was murdered back earlier this year. And then we have, and the majority of the year after that, instead of doing the right thing because there's 4 or 5 cops that were in the wrong, along with them getting this no-knock warrant in the first place under false pretenses. This goes so far from just releasing someone from prison that was wrongfully put there or had an extended sentence that probably shouldn't have been there. We need to sweep this whole thing. We need to pick up this whole thing and dust it off and find out what the real approach that we need to do to change things are. I think many people don't know exactly how corrupt and upside down this system is. It's not just about putting people in prison once you've done something wrong, or maybe there was some evidence was overlooked. There is an aggressive, actionable approach to putting people in jail because it's easy to do so. And after you do so and people fight back, the public's gonna say, well, what did they do? What have we heard about Breonna Taylor? What have we heard about Kenneth Walker, her boyfriend, who had to go through the trauma? Oh, well, what were they doing? Oh, what happened with her ex-boyfriend? That's what we get from folks, because they know that the public has been brainwashed long enough to believe that certain people in this society deserve to be in prison. And if you can't find the evidence on them, they must have done something else. They know that, and so they can go forward with these types of actions. Where's the reform on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you make one great point after the next. I don't even know where to start, but I'll start with the last thing you just said. There have been some states that have passed laws banning no-knock warrants. Okay, fine, that's a good start, I guess. But what we're experiencing right now, what we're seeing happen in real time in the state of Kentucky is a very well orchestrated attempt to cover up the wrongdoing of the cops here, because they keep changing their story. There's been some evidence of, evidence tampering on the scene. I know I keep repeating this point over and over again because it boggles my mind that it's not getting the attention that it should get. They lied about the post office telling them that there were suspicious packages being sent to Breonna Taylor's home. That is what they used, that is what they cited to a judge in order to obtain the no-knock warrant. And then later, a post office inspector came out and said, that is not true. No one has said that to the police department. That is relevant because It shows you that they lied. They lied to a judge in order to obtain a warrant. Okay, and then on top of all of this, you see how the state prosecutor is telling the public one thing while telling these jurors something completely different, not giving them the opportunity to deliberate on possible homicide charges. And so you also mentioned Kenneth Walker, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, and the trauma that he experienced. In this next clip, we're gonna get part of his 911 call, which is heartbreaking every single time I hear it. But the jurors also talk about just the credibility of Kenneth Walker versus the cops in this case. Let's watch.
911 operator Harris, where is your emergency?
I don't know what's happening. Somebody kicked in the door and shot my girlfriend.
The thing that stood out to me when I was talking to him, he said, why would I call 911 if I thought it was the police?
Mm-hmm. That resonated with me because he didn't know who it was that was coming in. He had no idea. You could hear the distress. Everything about what he said was believable. It made sense all the way through.
You found him credible?
Yes.
Totally believable.
Did you find the police credible?
No.
No, there are too many inconsistencies in their story. Now I understand that, in a situation like that, you may not remember, but I didn't find their testimony credible.
What was your understanding about what happened that night?
It was a mess. It didn't seem to me that there was any organization or almost any leadership in the whole operation. From the evidence that I heard, this thing started out downhill to begin with. You don't need 7 cops to go up to somebody's door and knock on it and say, we're here to do an investigation at 1 o'clock in the morning. It kept going downhill from there. It was one mistake right after the other one, right after the other one. They covered it up.
They covered it up. I mean, you have a grand juror saying they covered it up. And since we're speaking about Kenneth Walker and the trauma that he had to experience on that insanely tragic night, I think it's important to mention that Louisville Metro Police Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly is actually countersuing Kenneth Walker for emotional distress. So Mattingly was struck in the leg by Kenneth Walker's warning shot. Remember, he didn't know that they were cops. They were plainclothes cops who barged into the home. They claimed that they announced themselves. Multiple witnesses said that that was not true. Now, Mattingly, Walker's bullet struck Mattingly in the leg, causing, this is what the lawsuit says, severe trauma, mental anguish, and emotional distress. Walker's conduct in shooting Mattingly is outrageous, intolerable, and offends all accepted standards of decency and morality. That is what the lawsuit against Breonna Taylor's boyfriend says. Okay, Breonna Taylor's dead. She bled out on the floor. And Kenneth Walker experienced that. Remember, they arrested Kenneth Walker.
Absolutely. And
then later let him go with no charges. It's so disgusting.
While arresting him, wished they had shot him. Saying all these horrible things to him as they have him walk out and screaming at him, and they got dogs barking, ready to shoot him, and then he wasn't shot. And it's like, you're lucky that you weren't. This is the emotional distress that somehow he laid upon them in your countersuit. It furthers the way that you can see the way certain folks will see them. It's like, well, he's just Kenneth Walker, a black guy that was traumatized when his girlfriend was murdered in the house, and he shot back because, well, we don't believe in the Second Amendment. Do we believe in you protecting your home from intruders? Do we or do we not believe in it? Every time we've had any kind of gun approach in this country, we see it as applies to certain folks, but it doesn't apply to the ones that we don't think deserve those protections and those rights. So especially when you show that you have one and that you can provide that kind of protection for yourself, which didn't work out for them sadly on that day, you then go and say, let me go ahead and see if I can get some more out of them, just to really dig it in and let them know how much I despise his existence. That's all this means. This is a big middle finger to the rest of himself and his family and everyone else that's associated with this case. It's, you know what, you may have thought that we hated you, but let me go ahead and confirm that for you. That's what this lawsuit means. It's frustrating, man. And and the only way that you can pull something off like this and think that you can convince enough people that it's okay is, again, you talked about how it's almost blood curdling to hear him screaming on the phone right after Breonna was shot. The only way you can take that and think, unlike the juror that said, I could hear the pain in his voice. Like, how could he fake that? The only way you can not hear that is to not think he's not the same kind of human being you are. He doesn't have emotions. When gunshots happen at 1 a.m. or whatever time it was in the middle of the night, when 30 shots rang through your house, the only people who cannot be worried about that are like aliens. They're non-humans. That's how bigotry and racism allow you to see people no matter what the circumstance is. So, hey, y'all, black folks have these superhuman tendencies. They can take 35 shots to the chest because they're built by like some other kind of creature. And then when you traumatize them, they're not actually hurt. That phone call was fake. He called the cops on the cops because that makes sense. It doesn't have to make sense. As long as you hate that person, you can say anything you want about them and come to that conclusion.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.